I left the Democratic Party last June after Hillary Clinton won the Democratic presidential nomination. After that point, there was just no reason to be a Democrat anymore. Hillary wasn't going to win, and even if she did win, it was going to be a Republican House at least, and probably a Republican Senate too, and whatever half-assed agenda she proposed to get through wasn't going to get through, so there was really no point in being associated with the Democratic Party after that time. My hope was that there might be a progressive revolution come back in 2020. However, hope for that is beginning to fade now because the Democrats have come totally unhinged, and in the last few months they haven't done anything to get me back. I'll probably remain independent for the time being, and we'll see how it goes eventually, but right now the Democrats aren't offering much of an alternative at all. In the run-up to the election, there was all this concern about whether Donald Trump would accept the results of the election or not, because surely he was going to lose, and he said that he might not accept the results of the election, and the Democrats just had a fit, just a temper tantrum about that, because Donald Trump wasn't going to accept a defeat because he was surely going to lose. Everybody knew, or everybody thought they knew anyway, or a lot of people thought they knew, that Hillary was surely going to win. It couldn't be any other way, and it was a different way. Hillary lost. Then guess what happened? Then they don't want to accept the results of the election. First, it was all this concern about whether Donald Trump was going to accept the results of the election, and then when they get their asses beat, they don't want to accept the results of the election. And so they begin doing everything they possibly can to undermine the official results of the election. They try to go forward with all these recount efforts in various states, and interestingly enough, there were no recount efforts in states that Hillary won. The recounts were focused only in states that Trump won. The recounts failed. In one or two cases, they actually increased Trump's margin of victory, so that effort failed. So then there was this campaign to get electors to change their mind, and there were these Hollywood actors who produced this video trying to get electors to change their vote. They said there only has to be 37 people, only 37 people have to switch. If there are 37 responsible Republicans, then they switch, and that wasn't going to work. That was never going to work. And of course the date for the electoral vote came, and Donald Trump won the votes in the Electoral College. Well, they still wouldn't let it go. Time came for Congress to certify the vote, or to officially count the votes that had been certified by the governors of the 50 states. And during that effort, Congresswoman Maxine Waters and I believe Sheila Jackson Lee and a few others persisted in this effort to get Congress to reject some of the official returns that had been submitted by the governor. The problem was they needed one U.S. senator to also sign an objection, and nobody would. And Maxine Waters is practically begging some senator right in the middle of the joint session, to join in with them and object to the results. And it wasn't going to work anyway, because by that time the new Congress had been sworn in. It was a Republican House and a Republican majority on both sides. So Vice President Biden, who was presiding at the time, had sense enough to understand that there was no point in even doing that, because the Senate and House were going to accept the results as submitted by the governors, and that's just the way that it was. Well, then President Trump takes office, and right away there's an effort to say that not many people attended the inauguration, and there was a big brouhaha about that, and there were also issues with the camera angles and what times the pictures were taken and similar issues, but nobody really wanted to go into that. So the next thing that happens is they start slow walking the cabinet, and that has just about completely failed. It is now March 2nd, and almost all of the top level cabinet officials have been confirmed, and they will be confirmed, it looks like. The labor guy withdrew, and I'm glad he did, because you don't need a cheeseburger magnate running the labor department, especially not one with his attitude. So I'm glad that he did withdraw. But almost all of the cabinet secretaries have been approved as of now. The former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, has been sworn in as Secretary of Energy. So there's not much left to go on the top level cabinet positions, although there are a lot of deputy secretaries and undersecretaries and so forth that still have to be appointed. And, it'll be interesting to see whether Democrats slow walk that. But they were never going to stop these cabinet members from taking office. So what they did was just completely unreasonable because they were never going to stop it. All they could do was delay, and they did delay, and they imposed the biggest delay in the confirmation of a cabinet that has ever occurred in the entire history of the United States, going back to George Washington. You've never had a situation like this. Well, there was all this garbage about Hillary won the popular vote, and so therefore she should be the president, and that should be the reasons that Electoral College members should change their vote, not understanding that the United States has never had a popular vote system ever. It's always been the Electoral College. The system functioned just as the framers intended for it to do, and that's just a fact. This has happened before. Matter of fact, I think it's happened a couple of times before, and it's what's built into the system. And I think Senator Boxer of California introduced legislation to try to get rid of the Electoral College, but she knows good and hell well that that requires 290 votes in the House, 67 votes in the Senate, and the approval of 38 legislatures, and there's no damn way that's going to happen. And so they persist in this effort that just isn't going to happen. Well, there was all this mess concerning, did the Russians hack the election? Did the Russians fool the American people? I think that that wasn't the case at all, because there was polling data consistently throughout the campaign that suggested a majority of Americans did not trust Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure what the final poll result was. Well, I do know what the final poll result was because she lost the election. But during the campaign season, upwards of 60% of the people were saying that they did not trust Hillary Clinton, and that is not a winning formula. There was all this sleaze about the FBI investigation, and I don't think the entire truth about that probably has ever come out. She's always had major ethical issues. As a matter of fact, her husband had ethical issues too, and people just didn't like her. She had a reputation for treating people very badly. Women who had problems with Bill, there were issues with them. There were issues with the way she treated people who were affected by the Benghazi crisis. She treated some of those people really horrible, and there were people who lost their lives. And she had a reputation for treating a lot of people that were beneath her in a very, very bad way, and just had a reputation for really bad character and dishonesty. And so I don't think that anyone should have been surprised that she lost the election. People forget that even if the vote had been determined by the presidential election had been determined by the popular vote, that still the Democrats lost Michigan, they lost Wisconsin, they lost Pennsylvania, they lost Ohio. Those blue states did flip, and that resulted in Republican congressional majorities in both the House and the Senate. And so, even if the election had gone the other way and Hillary had been elected president, when you consider the congressional vote, her agenda would have been doornail dead, and nothing would have gotten done at all in a country where something desperately needs to happen. I mean, the fact of the matter is this Obamacare is coming undone. You now have a third of the counties in the United States where there's only one company participating in Obamacare, and if that company withdraws, then you're going to have nobody participating in it, and Obamacare won't even exist in those counties. Then you have other areas where premiums are going through the roof. You have 18 of 23 Obamacare co-ops that have gone out of business, and something desperately needs to happen, because that is a system that is failing financially and is unsustainable. Nothing would have gotten done about that at all had Hillary won the White House. And yet they continue all of this business about the Russians interfered, when it's very clear that the white working class are the people who interfered, people who feel like they've been ignored by free trade deals and uncontrolled immigration and a lack of infrastructure spending. That is actually what happened. People who've been told that now there's just globalization and there's nothing that can be done about it, and they have to go get that damn 4-year degree that they don't have time to go get, and nor do they have the money to go get. Because we do not have a system that benefits older Americans, not very well anyway, who need to go back to school. Colleges and universities are just as hard on them as they are on the younger students. They do not decrease their standards at all. They still have to work as hard as the younger students, and paying for all that is a problem, as evidenced by the student loan crisis. So then you come down to the State of the Union address the other night, and they really came unhinged there. Everything the Democrats did with regard to the State of the Union address was just completely bizarre, and in some cases vicious. The president mentioned this new task force that's going to be formed in the Justice Department called Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement, focusing on people who have been victimized by illegal immigrants who never should have been in the United States to start with. And as soon as he announced that program, you heard boos from the Democrats all over the House chamber. And those boos resonated. Oh, believe me, they resonated. They resonated in Texas and Idaho and Wyoming and Montana, and they also resonated in the states that Democrats lost this time. My response to that was, how dare they disrespect people who have lost people to immigrants, illegal immigrants who should not have been here to start with, and had in some cases been deported several times before they got back into this country and committed those crimes. How can they disrespect those crime victims? How can they treat those native-born Americans like trash? That is despicable. To claim to be the party of the people and then treat victims of immigration crime like trash, like people who should be ignored because their problem doesn't fit with a particular political agenda. And then it got really despicable in this situation with disrespecting Karen Owens, the wife of Ryan Owens, who was the Navy SEAL who was killed in Yemen. And after she was honored and her husband was honored, there were these vicious attacks the next day, one of them orchestrated by a volunteer for the Clinton campaign. And they just were completely hostile toward this woman who lost her husband and went to the U.S. Capitol to see him honored for his sacrifice, and they were completely disrespectful and hostile toward that woman. Well, fortunately, this Clinton volunteer, who was employed at the time that he started all of this against Corinne Owen, was fired by his company the next day. He had said, how could she go and attend the State of the Union address by that idiot, referring to the president? Well, now he's out of the work. Who's the idiot now? I mean, what he did was despicable in attacking that woman. And what the Democrats did in booing essentially the victims of immigration crime, that was also despicable. They lost me when they nominated Hillary. They haven't done anything to get me back since then. And I am not a Republican. I don't like the conservative movement. I think the conservative movement has been a very bad thing. But in the Democratic Party, you got a bunch of people who are acting like big babies. And then also with the State of the Union address, there were these polls that came out, specifically a CNN poll, that said the vast majority of Americans approved of it. So what happens the next day? Then they start ginning up some more of this Russian business, and it's so obviously political. Well, this is what's going to happen with the Democratic Party. If there is even a slight improvement in the jobs picture in the United States, if the economic situation, which is not particularly good when you have 94 billion people not participating in the labor force because they cannot find jobs, if that improves slightly or moderately, then the Democrats are going to have a rough time of it in 2018. They may not win the House back. In fact, they probably won't. And what they're doing, the way they're behaving now, is not a good setup at all for 2020, because they are behaving like insane people. They are behaving despicably in many ways, and they are behaving like little children. Until they start behaving like adults and respectable people, I don't see them having much of a chance to come back. They are in the process right now of self-destructing, and that's the way it is.